Welcome back to my channel, everybody. I'm so glad that you are here. I am glad to be here. And I've got something real fun for you today. Before I start, let me just explain a little bit about what I'm doing. If you've noticed recently on my channel, I try to put up things that are different than what you're seeing out there on YouTube. Mad kudos to the YouTube channels that are just so dedicated. STS Nation, Carl Steinbeck, Legal Focus. I mean, there's so many amazing channels out there, and they've really helped people to understand the twists and turns of this case. So kudos to them. But I will say, there's like so much like oversaturation of information on this case, and there's a lot of the same stuff here and there. And sometimes I've gotten some comments, about, oh, I heard this or I heard that. Well, there's also a lot of people that might not have heard that. So anyway, I am trying to make a conscious effort to do things that are a little bit different and put a little different spin on it. That way, while we wait for Donna to go on trial and we wait for the witch, Wendi, to get arrested, and then maybe even Harvey, it'll give you something a little maybe new to look at. So what I did today is I compiled as much original old footage of the news reporting on the Dan Markel murder, as well as the memorial service for Dan Markel and a few other things. And I thought it would be fun. And actually, we could observe and understand some things we might not have seen before. We are going to first just quickly do a recap. A lot of people know this already, but Dan Markel, Florida State University professor, law professor, pulled into his driveway on July 19th, 2014. Pulled in his driveway. He was on the phone with this guy from a school that him and Wendi, his ex-wife Wendi, were looking into for their son. They have 2 children together. They were in the middle of an extremely volatile divorce, and they were fighting back and forth because she decided she didn't want Dan anymore. She divorces Dan, and then she just wants to up and leave, steal his kids from him, and go on down to Miami and live happily ever after, about 7 hours away from Tallahassee, which is where Dan worked as a professor. And basically take his kids away from him and pretend like he didn't exist. Pretend like, oh, you didn't have these kids with me. I'm more important. I'm the more important parent than you are. And I'm just going to take my kids and go down to Miami. My mother, Donna, my parents, Harvey and Donna, they will watch my kids while I get a job in Miami, and I can just forget about you. Well, hello. Dan was a very present father. He was a father that was very involved. His kids were everything to him. And the last thing he was going to do was let this woman pretend he didn't even exist and that he's not an equal 50% parent in their upbringing. So bad stuff starts happening. Her mother, Donna, and her start, and here I am going into the case you probably already heard, but I just want to say it. They go into this big thing where they start emailing each other back and forth. And her mother, who's an absolute psycho control freak, starts telling her, you need to win this. You need to get custody of these kids and come on down here to Miami, and you need to threaten him. And they were Jewish, okay? And he was more, a devoted Jewish, devout Jew than she was. And the mother decided that she was going to encourage Wendi to dress up the kids in Hitler costumes, threaten to make them Christians, and all this crazy stuff. Even wanting to pay him off so that he would let her move down, like $1 million to let Wendi go down to Miami and live there, and they would like cover expenses so he could fly back and forth. That way, stupid Wendi could go live in Miami. Well, Dan was not having it, and he was in the process of hiring an attorney that didn't even really know or practice family law. But he said, I'll help you. I'm an attorney too. So he gathered this guy, and he was going to just go after Wendi. In fact, right around the corner before his death, he was he was getting ready to go have another court date with her. And it wasn't looking good for Wendi. It wasn't. So anyway, he was shot and killed. And then all of a sudden we find out there's hitmen involved. Then mommy is involved. Then the brother is involved. The brother's girlfriend, who was also with one of the hitmen. And then it does spiral back to Wendi being like, but she has not been tried yet. Anyway, just a quick recap on the case. I left some things out because everybody's heard this already a million times. But yeah, so let's start with July 20th, 2014. The news broke about Dan Markel's death. Okay, so this is one of the earliest I could find of breaking news on Dan Markel, first announcing and talking about his death.
The Florida State University community is mourning the loss of a law professor who was shot and killed. Good evening, I'm Christina Resnack. Thank you for joining us. According to the school, Dan Markel was taken to the hospital after being shot yesterday. He died from his injuries this morning. According to the Florida State University Law School website, Markel primarily taught criminal law. He graduated from Harvard Law School in 2001. We spoke with Ryan Rechler, one of Markel's former students, who says he took 2 of Markel's classes.
He really is just brilliant. I mean, the guy really challenges his students to think critically. He brought the best out of me as a student. You know, he really had the ability to really pull at your brain and get you to think on your feet. And he was just really a master of the topics. He was just really intelligent with criminal law.
Funeral arrangements will be made by Markel's family in his hometown of Toronto, but in Tallahassee, a memorial service will be held tomorrow at noon at a Congregation Shamre Torah that's located at 4858 Cary Forest Parkway. FSU says another memorial will be planned in the fall when more students and faculty are back in Tallahassee. Police are still investigating the shooting, which happened yesterday in the Benton Hills neighborhood around 11 a.m. If you have any information, you're urged to call the Tallahassee Police Department at 850-606-5800.
So it's a common theme that his students absolutely worshipped him. They just got so much from him as a professor, the student-professor relationships that he developed. I mean, he was the type to, spend time with them outside of the campus, even invite them over for dinner, just to chat. It's just incredible, all the things that everybody had to say about him. So it does remind me a little bit about Wendi describing him as being difficult and argumentative, and some people did not like Dan. Well, we're not going to hear much of that here. If anything, we hear the opposite of that.
Prominent law professor at Florida State University. Police convinced it's a murder case, but so far there are no good leads, so they're asking for your help. Tallahassee police now scrambling to unravel the riddle of who killed Florida State University professor Dan Markel.
We do believe that this was not a random act where he just surprised somebody. What we do believe is that Mr. Markel, unfortunately, was the intended victim.
He was shot.
Okay, I just want to stop right there. So right away from the get-go, they're saying that it was targeted. They do go around the neighborhood. There are people obviously concerned that lived in the neighborhood and said, should we lock our doors tonight? Like, do we need to be concerned about some random guy killing people? No, they knew right from the beginning that he was the target. So I find that interesting because remember, this is all within like a day to 5 days, what I'm playing for you now. So they had gone and picked up Wendi Adelson from a Mosaic restaurant where she was having lunch with her friends, brought her back and interrogated her. I think it's because of her interrogation that they knew right away, because as we know that in the first 15, 20 minutes, she basically, outed Charlie and put the spotlight right on her. Another thing is, let me say this too. People have said that, talking about the fact that Dan was difficult, but also if you noticed in my last video, I played that that writing class interview that Wendi gave, and she talked about how Dan, what was the word she said? She said something like he was obviously targeted by a hitman or whatever. That's really weird that she would say that, don't you think? Because what person, like why would a person like Dan be targeted by a hitman? He was not a drug user. He didn't hire prostitutes. He didn't have a gambling problem. He wasn't selling drugs. I mean, these are the kind of things that would make one assume that a hitman would come at your door, right? He was just a law professor. He was, he had 2 kids. He was just a regular guy, A law professor doesn't get a hitman showing up at the door. He just doesn't. So when she said that in her interview, which is a couple years later, but when she said that in her interview, I was like, she wasn't supposed to know at that point anything. Remember? Because if we all go by what Wendi says, Wendi had no idea. So for her to voice that out, that it was a hitman, is pretty telling to me, don't you think? I mean, I don't know if anybody picked up on that, but the only person that would send a hitman to somebody like Dan would be her, right? I mean, who else is going to show up? He didn't do any of those dark things like drugs that would warrant a hitman. I don't know. I'm just pointing that out. And then you hear this on what I'm playing for you now. Right away in that first week, they knew he was a targeted hit. And they had to have already done their research that this is, again, just, a regular, honest taxpayer working at this law school with 2 kids and going through a divorce. And I feel like they knew right away. Why it's taking 11 years is beyond me. One by one, but it's like, oh my gosh, you guys are dragging your feet. We're all waiting over here. It's so obvious who did all this. Just arrest Wendi now. But let's play some more. I'm sorry for going off on a tangent, but this next footage is, I don't know if this is a fact that most of you know or not, but it's interesting, and it's going to be discussed in this next clip, that Dan Markel's mother, Ruth, was on the phone with Dan on the morning of the murder. They were on the phone together, and he said he had to get off because he was going to get on the phone with, I guess, a representative from this school that he was interested in talking to him about his son going to this school. So he said, Mom, I got to go. And she goes on to say that she was thankful that he had to make another call to this person, because if she had stayed on the phone with him, she would have actually heard her son get killed.
One of the things that I started to notice is that the victims are really underexposed in the court system and in the public. So if you think about TV and you watch a TV show and you see there's a person who's called in to speak to law enforcement, like the family, and then after that you just see them in the court. So the point is that the victim suddenly becomes invisible.
But Ruth Markel won't be invisible, and she won't be silent, talking about her son, Dan Markel, and the grief she's lived with since his murder in Tallahassee.
It is true that if you go on all social media, it's mostly about Wendi, Donna, Charlie, Harvey, and Dan Markel gets lost in the whole thing a little bit, and I'm just really glad that I'm doing this video, because it's really mostly, I'm making comments about Wendi and Donna, but it's really about him and going back to the roots of this case and just the tragedy and the loss of this incredible man.
She wrote a book about reflection, grief, and navigating the justice system.
It's the worst thing in the world, the worst thing, and that's why I actually talk about grief.
The day he was murdered, Dan called his mother like he did every day.
talked. He talked to my uncle, his uncle. He put him on the phone and wished him a happy birthday. And then he said something unusual, which is, I have to get off the phone. I have to make another call. And he did, and that was probably saved and blessed me.
Ruth called it a blessing because if Dan did not get off the phone with her, she believes she would have heard him be killed after pulling into his driveway.
He drove into his driveway, and then he said to the other person, he says, somebody's coming in behind me, like he didn't say that he didn't know who they were. And then the other person heard 2 shots.
Since that day, there have been 5 arrests and 4 convictions in connection to her son's murder. His ex-brother-in-law, a one-time periodontist in South Florida, the most recent to be convicted.
First-degree murder. The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder.
His ex-mother-in-law, the most recent to be charged after being arrested at Miami International Airport on a one-way ticket to Vietnam.
At this point, do you feel like justice has been served?
Well, we're on the way. We're in a good situation now. So Charlie Adelson, that's Wendy's brother, he was just convicted now, November 6th, 2023. And his mother, Donna Adelson, was arrested. She was trying to leave the country and go to Vietnam. So she's in jail. This is really new. And we don't know exactly when her trial will be. So we're certainly coming we're in the right chapter.
As for Markel's ex-wife, Wendi Adelson,
I'm so scared that maybe someone did this. Not because they hate Danny, but because they thought this was good somehow.
The state has named her a co-conspirator, but Wendi has denied these allegations and she's not been formally arrested or charged. Ruth's life now is focused on making sure people don't forget about her son, who he was, and that his kids remember the Dan she knew.
If he was looking at everything you're doing for, his family, what would he say to you?
I'm doing intentional advocacy and all these other new things that I'm involved in with victims and so forth. But I think that, in his core, this is a sad story, and he would feel the devastation.
Okay, so just a heads up, there's a couple moments in the video that's like super loud, so just be ready with your volume button. It's not me, it's the actual video, so just be ready for it. I don't want to blow your head off.
Friends and family gathered at Congregation Chomri Torah today to remember FSU law professor Dan Markel.
This is probably the strangest, saddest, most surreal experience I've had in my life. I don't think I could ever imagine this scenario.
Dan Markel primarily taught criminal law at Florida State Law School, although members of both the law and Tallahassee community feel that he left a significant mark behind.
He's going to be greatly missed. He left an indelible mark. I think that's important. And it's good to see how that indelible mark, how vast it extends.
Many that knew Markel say he will live on through the people and community members that he's touched.
This brings us back to the word vivacious. A rare sense of that word. A word that means tenacity, somebody who will live on, who will outlive, who will not be extinguished.
Reporting from Tallahassee, Florida, Brittany Kleinpeter, WTXL, ABC 27, dedicated to you.
Neighbors remember a Florida State University law professor shot and killed inside his home. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Paulo Salazar. Tallahassee police say they found Dan Markel with a gunshot wound in his Benton Hills home on Friday, and he died of his injuries early Saturday morning. Now, officers were called to the home after a neighbor reported hearing a loud bang. Police are investigating his death as a homicide, but no suspects have been identified as of yet. The Tallahassee Police Department announced late this morning that they now set up a tip line dedicated solely to this case, and they say that the residents in the area should not be concerned about their safety.
I can assure you that we are interviewing everybody that would be connected to this case. We're also canvassing the neighborhood. We have officers out here today, both in uniform and in plain clothes. They are going door to door.
And they're asking anyone with any information at this time to call the tip line at either 850-891-4462 or Big Bend Crime Stoppers at 574-8477. They don't want your name, just your information. And according to FSU, Markel primarily taught criminal law at Florida State Law School. He graduated from Harvard Law School in 2001. And Sunday, those who knew Dan Markel gathered to celebrate his life with a memorial at Congregation Shamrai Torah. Those who knew him say Markel will live through the people and community members that he touched so deeply.
He's going to be greatly missed. You know, he left an indelible mark. I think that's important. And it's good to see how that indelible mark, how vast it extends.
Now, FSU says they'll hold another memorial in the fall when more students and faculty are in Tallahassee. Funeral arrangements will be made in Markel's hometown of Toronto.
Friday morning at his home in this quiet Benton Hills neighborhood, the 41-year-old was the father of 2 boys.
They were certainly his pride and joy.
A beloved college professor, a legal scholar, a Harvard grad, published in the New York Times. He spoke at this conference in 2012.
The sentencing issue is distinct from the criminalization question.
Markel's ex-wife, a fellow FSU professor, Wendi Adelson, said through her lawyer that she is just devastated and scared to death. Police say Markel apparently opened his door to his killer.
Anytime that there is a robbery or let's say a burglary, most people don't have the keys to everybody's house.
There was no sign of forced entry, a key clue, say police. It means Markel knew the killer. Police responded to his house after neighbors reportedly heard a loud bang. The next day, Saturday morning, Markel was pronounced dead at a local hospital. Tallahassee Democrat reports a single gunshot wound to the back. Tallahassee police now say they're short on clues and have opened a dedicated tip line, hoping to provide the kind of justice Markel sought for others.
There probably are 2 people in this world that know exactly where Mr. Markel was injured. One of those would be Mr. Markel himself, and the other would be the suspect in this case.
Okay, I wanted to give a shout out to one of my viewers on a comment that was made that I think is really awesome, and it's something I never thought about when it comes to Wendi Adelson. So, Peter Kalinikos, that's the last name. Peter Kalinikos commented on my video, one of my previous videos on Wendi, saying she planned on finding Dan herself, and that was the reason for her driving there. The neighbor ends up foiling her plan, and after Donna is convicted, Wendi then should be arrested. Isn't that interesting? I mean, think about it. Imagine if that's true. And I guess it's possible, right? Imagine that. Her actually driving down to the crime scene, not just to drive by or reminisce, or not just to drive by and lurk and see if it was done, but to actually be the damsel in distress that shows up and finds him dead and then makes the call to 911 instead of the neighbor. The neighbor got to him first. Just a little something to think about. I thought it was really interesting, and I wanted to give a shout out to my viewer who made a very interesting theory that I just think is so cool. Maybe she wanted everyone to feel bad for her and everybody be like, oh, how horrible. So it's like a double whammy, right? You find your spouse dead, or your ex-spouse, sorry. You find your ex-spouse dead, and then you get everybody surrounding around you and pitying you and feeling bad for you because of the trauma of seeing that and finding it. So I don't know. I just want to say thank you for your comments, not just to him, but to everybody, because hey, it takes a village, right? And we're all trying to, you can't help but trying to find out yourself what happened here. And it's just the theories are just really amazing. So keep them coming. So this is a little bit about the EMS response time after the 911 call. Take a listen.
This after the release of a 911 call in the shooting death of FSU professor Dan Markel revealed that it took nearly 20 minutes for help to arrive, a delay blamed on dispatcher error. That 911 call was the focus of a board meeting this morning. As we initially reported, the center's director tells us a dispatcher inadvertently set the wrong priority on the call made by a neighbor of Dan Markel. The board is now ordering a full review of operations to find out what went wrong and how to fix it.
We're going to see really just the extent of the issues, the extent of the training. Obviously, there was some human error involved here, and the extent to which technology may or may not have played a role in that. And of course, that will drive whatever the recommendations are going forward.
Okay, so yeah, 911 sucks, right? Because Dan might have been alive still if they had gotten to him a little quicker. So really, really unfortunate.
Tallahassee police canvassed the area around Dan Markel's home Monday, looking for any clues into his death.
This is a puzzle, and we need to get all the pieces of the puzzle, put it together, and bring this case to a close.
At about 11 Friday morning, officers were first called to Markel's house, where they found the popular law professor with an apparent gunshot wound. He was rushed to a local hospital but died a day later from his injuries.
If it was a burglary or home invasion gone bad, that's very alarming. If it was somehow or another targeted to Professor Markel, frankly, that's frightening for a whole different reason.
While a recent spree of break-ins had neighbors on edge, police said there was no indication of forced entry at Markel's home, calling his death a homicide.
It was not a robbery. It does not appear that it was a burglary. At this time, it does appear that Mr. Markel, unfortunately, was the intended victim in this case.
A 41-year-old father of two young boys, Markel was in the middle of a divorce. He taught criminal law at Florida State University, but was recognized nationwide with his writings featured in the New York Times, Slate, and The Atlantic. He's seen here speaking at a conference in 2012.
It's probably going to become the basis of a book, and I look forward to getting your thoughts about it.
Markel also co-founded a popular legal blog with longtime friend Ethan Lieb.
Dan Markel was an extraordinary person, an extraordinary scholar, an extraordinary friend, an incredible life.
Over the weekend, friends and family paid tribute to Markel at a memorial service. In a statement, Florida State University called him an outstanding teacher and extraordinary scholar.
I'll tell you, he was a tough professor, which is a good thing. He made you reach for something a lot greater than what you normally would have.
And a lawyer for Wendi Adelson, Markel's ex-wife, reportedly said she is devastated by the death of Dan and scared to death.
Yeah, she better be scared. You better be scared, Wendi. They're coming for you, girl. They're coming for you. It's only a matter of time. Sitting over there in Austin, sitting over there and traveling back and forth to Miami, by the way, because there are pictures out there of her partying on like party boats down by the shore of Miami on this little island that you have to take a boat to get to that's right off of Miami. She's out there drinking, having a blast, going to concerts. Yeah, it should make you really mad, right? It makes me mad. But yeah, Miss Devastated is scared. Okay, this next clip is, pretty rare, was not seen by many people at all. So just going to go ahead and play it for you guys. It's about 2 years after the actual murder this came out. It is a local news station. So here you go.
What's going on with him?
I don't know. The driver's side window is all bashed in, and he's got blood all over his head.
That was part of a 911 call from July 18th, 2014. A neighbor found Florida State law professor Dan Markel in his garage. He was shot twice in the head. It was a murder mystery with minimal information for 22 months before two men were arrested and charged with killing Markel. And on the 2-year anniversary of when Markel was shot and killed here at his house, one of the prime suspects in his murder appeared in court. Sigfredo Garcia's case management hearing Monday morning lasted less than 5 minutes. His attorneys requested a speedy trial.
Our primary objective at this time is to familiarize ourselves with the state's discovery. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to let our actions at the courtroom kind of speak for themselves and focus on the case. And that's kind of all I can say at this point, because we literally just got the evidence in the case yesterday.
The request was granted. Garcia's trial begins November 14th.
That's a strategic move that we made.
Police believe Garcia and another man, Luis Rivera, were hired to kill Markel 2 years ago. Documents show a suspected connection between the family of Markel's ex-wife and the accused killers, but other arrests have yet to be made. Reporting in Tallahassee, I'm Matt Gelka.
They say they were given new discovery information that has not yet been made public, but they did say that it includes wiretap information.
In early June, police investigators filed a document indicating they were worried some of the ex-wife's family members had the means and had been overheard talking about fleeing the country.
Assuming I'm a suspect, I can't.
No, you're not a suspect.
In a previously released 5-hour interview with ex-wife Wendi Adelson on the day of the murder, she is heard telling police that she would be surprised if her family was involved.
They would never do that.
Right.
I don't know who would be angry enough with him.
Well, that's what I have to find out.
To do something like this.
The state attorney's office expects to take about 3 weeks going through and redacting the latest information before any of it is released to the public. Reporting from the state capitol, I'm Mike Massalinda.
The theory of the case is that the Adelsons are behind this.
That is, yes.
The plan, called the bump, was to have an undercover FBI agent hand Markel's ex-mother-in-law a note.
How you doing? Just want to give you this.
Asking for money to help suspect Luis Rivera, already in jail on drug charges.
I want to make sure that you take care of what he's going through, the way you're taking care of Katie.
I think a few minutes after arriving back at her condo, she calls Charlie Adelson.
Charlie Adelson called Catherine Magbanawa.
99% sure when I was talking to her, she said it's mentioned your name.
The next day, Charlie Adelson meets with his mother.
They were very cautious, looking around a lot. They were leaning in close to each other, talking very low.
Eventually, Catherine Magbanawa calls Sigfrido Garcia, the other defendant.
Tell me, I'm going to make a phone call. Are you?
I'm not making that phone call. I'm going to take care of this problem.
Eventually, the undercover number was called.
The number was called. They didn't pick up.
In a later call, Charlie reassures his mother.
Just fishing is all that's going on. And I wouldn't worry about it at all.
The two defendants are expected to present their witnesses all day Tuesday.
I wouldn't be worried about it at all. If you did nothing, if Donna and Charlie did nothing, they wouldn't be talking like this, right? I mean, just let's remind ourselves about these little tidbits that are out there. It's going to come up in Donna's trial.
And the jury is expected to get the case on Wednesday. Reporting from the state capitol, I'm Mike Vassalinda. In an effort to find a smoking gun in this case, an undercover FBI agent approached Donna Adelson. She's the mother of the slain FSU law professor's ex-wife. In April 2016, more than a month before the first arrest in the Markel murder, an undercover FBI agent approached Donna Adelson.
We know that your family has been taking care of Katie and her friend Pluto for quite some time after your problem up north has been resolved.
She is the slain law professor's ex-mother-in-law. Police believe that she's at the bottom of a conspiracy to kill her son-in-law over his refusal to allow the couple's two children to move to South Florida.
And I want to let you know that my brother, he's incarcerated. He helped your family with this problem you guys had up north. And we want to make sure that he's going through some rough times, and we want to make sure that you take care of what he's going through the way you're taking care of Katie.
Friday, the FBI agent took the stand.
What is a bump designed to do? What's the purpose?
Well, the purpose of a bump is to approach the target or the individual and try to start a conversation.
What happened next, say prosecutors, is the conspirators started talking to each other. Wiretaps from those conversations will be played Monday. No one in the Adelson family has been charged in this case, and the family, through its attorney, denies any involvement. Reporting from the state capitol, I'm Mike Vassalinda.
Okay, so this is a little bit of Jeremy Cohen, who was able to stop by the hospital that night. He wasn't with him when Dan actually passed, but he was able to stop by, and maybe Dan was able to hear him or be able to feel the touch of his hand, or but I thought this was interesting.
It's been 10 years since Dan Markel was murdered. Does it feel like it's been 10 years?
I mean, I can remember him like it was yesterday, but no, it does seem like it's been a long time since that happened.
He is talking about July 18th, 2014, when two hitmen shot the FSU law professor in the garage of his home on Trescott Drive.
Definitely didn't believe it at first and had a lot of questions. I called him and left a voicemail. Ended up seeing him in the hospital that night, and sadly, saw him right before he passed.
Cohen and his wife Tracy met Dan through mutual friends and lived down the street.
Our friendship grew as we kind of grew as parents.
Cohen says Dan knew a lot of people throughout Tallahassee.
He really was kind of a gatherer of people. So he liked having Shabbat dinners with people at his house. He often brought people in from all corners of the community.
That's how colleague and friend Jason Solomon also remembers Dan.
Dan was someone who really was big about connecting people, both professionally and personally. And so he really brought together people who were starting their careers as law professors.
Solomon is a part of the group Justice for Dan, pushing for accountability for his death and helping his family get access to their 2 grandchildren. He says they're doing something to honor him 10 years later.
We launched a Dan Markel Memorial Prize in Criminal Law Theory to honor the future students and scholars who are thinking hard about the purposes of the criminal justice system.
A world of criminal justice that is now working for Markel after his murder. 4 people have been convicted for their role in his death, including his ex-brother-in-law, Charlie Adelson. Local criminal defense attorney Tim Jansen says we may not be where we are without the help of a next-door neighbor.
That neighbor identified a car like a Prius. That really helped the FBI locate vehicles in the neighborhood through cameras that fit that description.
Donna Adelson, Markel's ex-mother-in-law, is in jail right now, awaiting trial. Prosecutors say she conspired with her son Charlie to kill Markel. Cohen says he is glad to see the state attorney's office working to get justice for Markel.
We went for a long time without having any answers and knowing anything about who was behind it. So here we are 10 years later, and 5 people are behind bars.
And boy, are we waiting for Donna to go down. If you are excited for August and the trial of Donna Adelson, give me a thumbs up right now on this video, because we're all going to be there. We're all going to be watching and waiting. And go ahead, type below who you know is next in the comments, because it's coming. They're coming for her. Here is the press conference for the arrest of one of the hitmen, Sigfredo Garcia.
We have arrested Sigfredo Garcia for the murder of Professor Daniel Markel. The state attorney approved a probable cause affidavit for him yesterday evening, and TPD obtained an arrest warrant. Mr. Garcia was located by the Hollandale Beach Police Department in Broward County and taken into custody. He is currently in the Broward County Jail awaiting a first appearance hearing and extradition to Leon County. This is still an active criminal investigation. In order not to jeopardize this ongoing investigation, the probable cause in this case has been sealed by Judge Solstrom. This will limit the information that we can provide to you today. I would ask for your patience as we continue to move forward with this investigation. We are not finished yet.
This case is ongoing and continuing. So if we were to release all of the details of the case, that would jeopardize our case that we're continuing to work. I'm not available to do that at this time. I would say that our investigators began working this case immediately. From our patrol officers who arrived on scene that day, to the neighborhood canvases, to the countless hours that our officers put into this. We would not be here today without them. So we applaud them for the work that they have done. Unfortunately, there is no timeline in any types of these cases. We want to make sure that we get the information correct, we get it right the first time, and we do the very best service we can to the family of Mr. Markel. This has affected all of us here in our community. Anytime someone is injured or murdered, it affects us all. It's an atrocity and should not be happening in our community. It does bring us satisfaction, but again, it will never ever take the horror away of losing a family member. Again, the details of the case I'm precluded from talking about because of the sealing of the probable cause. The probable cause would be released once we have completed our investigation.
The murder of Professor Markel struck a deep chord within this community that resonated around the country. I hope that as this investigation continues to progress, it reassures the community of TPD's unwavering commitment to their safety and bringing those who violate our laws to justice.
And here is the memorial from the FSU Law School. And look to see who's sitting in the front row. Of course.
Slain Florida State University College of Law professor Dan Markel was remembered by friends, family, and colleagues at a memorial Tuesday at Florida State. Emotions ranged from laughter to tears as 8 speakers, including Markel's older sister Shelley Markel, remembered the 41-year-old father of 2 who was shot in the head and killed in July.
Danny was the most relentlessly productive person I ever met. He was a constant outflowing of prose and revisions and ideas. For him, it was about the social aspect. It was, wouldn't this job be better if we could spend more time together?
With so many wonderful ties, as well as a deep and wide breadth of friendships, it makes the loss from his untimely death so far-reaching and impactful. And as painful as these last weeks have been, my family and I find a measure of solace and comfort knowing that Danny lived and embraced life fully, and in turn was embraced so warmly by all of you.
Faculty in general, I think, can have a tendency to sort of compartmentalize their lives. There's sort of what you do at work, there's the teaching, how you interact with your colleagues, and then you might have a private life that's kept separate from that. And Danny just wanted to tear all of those walls down. And the way he did it was just to exemplify it in his own life. I don't have many colleagues I've ever had who would say, come over to my house and have dinner with my kids, and then we'll read them stories together.
This is Sean Rossman reporting for the Tallahassee Democrat and Tallahassee.com.
You know what I was thinking about through that? So I saw her standing up there at that podium talking about all the impact that Dan had made on so many people at FSU, at Prof's blog, all these other people he met in Washington, California, even in Israel. He met so many people and had such a big impact on their lives. And she talked about how intelligent, scholarly he was. You know what I thought about is how right around the time that Shelley, the sister, is giving this speech, is about the time in August that Wendi was supposed to speak. She was chosen to speak at a podium in front of a huge audience at Florida State University. She was chosen for this to speak about her book. And what I find funny is that because of the death of Dan Markel, that never happened. And how in the end, as jealous as she was of Dan, she was so jealous of him. She didn't like that he was so admired for his work and his mind that I find it funny that the one who ends up being spoken about is Dan, and Wendi never got her chance. And I just think that's like a really smooth revenge.
I'm Jennifer Portman with the Tallahassee Democrat, here with Sean Rossman. Sean's been working on the sensational homicide that we've had here in Tallahassee on Friday of FSU law professor Daniel Markel. Sean, kind of give us a recap of this. This has been an absolute nonstop talker.
So about 11 a.m. on Friday afternoon, police were called out to the 2100 block of Trescott Drive, which is just north of Benton Road in the Benton Hills neighborhood. And they found a man who was later identified as Markel with a gunshot wound to the head. He was taken to a local hospital and died early Saturday morning. And now, since then, we've got a little bit of information. We didn't know where he was shot beforehand. Now we know that he was shot in the head, and we also know that he was the target for someone, whoever killed him, in this case, and that there was not a random incident, I guess.
Right, and obviously there's been a lot of speculation about what that is. The police are understandably releasing very little information right now. They've opened a tip line dedicated to this. They've been canvassing the neighborhood. Still nothing new, no new information so far today, right?
Nothing so far today.
Okay, one of the things that has been so interesting is, we're seeing stories, international news stories about this. Markel clearly had a huge presence in the academic legal community. One of the things that we're finding is that he was really on the vanguard of these law blogs. Can you talk a little bit about what that means?
Well, apparently Professor Markel started a blog called Prof's Blog back in, I think, 2005. Correct. And it's a place for young law professors, aspiring law professors, to kind of share each other's experiences, talk a little bit about the law, and just get to know each other. And I guess this is a pretty revolutionary thing, or a vanguard thing at the time, and now it's grown into this big thing, and people are always referring to this blog, and he was a leader sort of in that world.
Right. And I talked to a guy this morning, a law professor at University of Ohio, and he was talking about how really Markel went beyond just posting a blog, that he really was this person who went out and cultivated new law professors, really worked to bring them in. He'd be the one who would host the cocktail parties, the happy hours at the conferences. So really, I think what this professor was saying was that, part of, because he was such a connector in this academic community, is why this has really been reverberating the way it has. That's exactly what I've been hearing. People are definitely shocked because he was so well known and well liked, it seemed to be. But at the same time, people are just completely befuddled. Yeah, they're blown away by it, really. And one of the things that this professor was saying is that there's concern, in the absence of knowing what the motive was or what happened in this case, was this because of something he wrote on his blog? Was this a disgruntled student? I mean, the speculation kind of runs rampant. And this law professor was saying that, just professors in the country are really looking to see who ends up being charged, what this ends up turning out to be for considering their own safety.
Right.
So anyway, Sean is continuing to follow this story. We'll see what happens. And thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
And this is the full speech that Charlie Markel gave at that FSU memorial service.
It's hard to believe that 8 weeks have passed since I was last here in Tallahassee, and I spoke at the first of many memorial services for my brother, Danny. I said then that it was the strangest, saddest, and most surreal time of my life. I didn't think I could have ever imagined this scenario, and I was wondering if I was ever going to wake up. Since that time, I do feel like I have started to wake up, and I have begun to face an ugly new reality where my brother is no longer with us. It still feels surreal most of the time, and I certainly feel both sad and angry at many moments in the day. But there is also a newer feeling within me, a sense of awe and amazement. And these feelings I can only attribute to the power of the friendships that have been revealed, the show of admiration, respect, and love for Danny that have appeared in the hundreds and hundreds of cards, letters, newspaper articles, and posts online, not to mention the memorial gatherings that have taken place in Tallahassee, South Florida, Boston, New York, Jerusalem, Toronto, and here today with these most amazing remarks and kind words. I can't thank you enough for them. We used to tease Danny a lot that he had 100 best friends. Because at every turning point or a new geographic destination in his life, he would form a bond with someone new, a friendship that would last and be maintained for years. And I always knew that Danny had the power to connect people. But I don't think I ever realized how many people he had touched and how strong those bonds were. And when I look around in here today, I continue to see and understand the strength of his connections. He moved to Tallahassee for an academic opportunity at FSU, but he embraced the community, and it in turn embraced him. Dan's community here at FSU Law School and the legal community of scholars that he wrote with and blogged with and conferenced with, as well as his very many Tallahassee friends and colleagues and students, you all formed a critical and essential part of Dan's life. He was part of this community, and it enriched him. So on behalf of my parents, and the rest of my brother's family and his sons, I want to thank you for all of your kindness and the support that you provided, both to us in this difficult time, but more importantly to Danny in his academic and work life, and as well as his everyday life and his social life. And a particular thank you to Dean Widener, who brought us all here today to celebrate Danny, and to the most amazing speeches from colleagues and friends and students. It was so beautiful and so meaningful. Danny accomplished so much in his 41 years. He went from being my little brother to a renowned scholar, teacher, and a mature and devoted dad. He has so many accomplishments, and he has touched so many lives. He was a prolific writer and scholar, as you heard today, an academic that took the writing and the scholarship side seriously, but also made sure that he was engaging and a helpful teacher to his students. His ideas, they were incredibly important to him, and he wanted to make sure that they lived on. And this is where this community can help. Students, faculty, colleagues, you will all play a vital role in continuing Dan's work and ensuring that his legacy lives on. As we all know, Danny was a person of strong principles and strong opinions, intelligent and articulate, and he was proud of all of his accomplishments. But there was one thing that towered above all others in his pride, commitment, and love, and that were his two sons, Ben and Lincoln. He loved them so much, and he was involved, dedicated, and loving father to them. Danny was a sharer, and we all saw the postings, the pictures, and the references to every move made by Ben and Lincoln. Whether it was on the door of his office, or in his office, or on Facebook. But to put it in perspective, he was a serious guy, an academic, a professor, and yet he always knew that his priority was his boys, and he wasn't afraid to let the entire world know it. With so many wonderful ties, as well as a deep and wide breadth of friendships, it makes the loss from his untimely death so far-reaching and impactful. And as painful as these last weeks have been, my family and I find a measure of solace and comfort knowing that Danny lived and embraced life fully, and in turn was embraced so warmly by all of you. So we will remember and honor him, his friendships, his scholarly work, his commitment to his community, his love of his boys and his family, his legacy. Danny, we miss you very much and remember you in our hearts forever.
Thank you for watching. I so appreciate you guys. Make sure you subscribe, like, share the channel. Give me a thumbs up below, and I will see you next time.